Hello, everyone. Luke Broyles here, and today I have a special guest and a friend of mine, and we're going to be talking about self custody. We're going to be talking about Bitcoin and the risks with that, with everything when it comes to that, and the benefits too of having a team on your side. If you're watching this, you've probably seen videos of mine before. Yeah, a lot of videos of mine before, perhaps, and you've heard me say 1,000 times the importance of self custody, the importance of having a team, and this is one of the things that is one of the most favorite parts about my work in Bitcoin and my work at the Bitcoin Advisor is the really wonderful and awesome team that we have. So it's not just me, and I don't want it to be just me because with the team, basically you can compound your Bitcoin education way faster on your own, right? I ended up at Bitcoin Advisor because of my obsession about Bitcoin. And it dawned on me that the best way to be obsessed is to have a team of fellow passionate and obsessed people. So there's over 40 people on the Bitcoin Advisor team. Many of them like myself as the first American at the Bitcoin Advisor. You know Peter Dunworth. You know probably Andy Pattinson. Maybe Seb Bunny, Knut Svanholm, Holdenot. James Checkmatey, right? You know all these guys. But I want to introduce someone in this video today who is pretty experienced when it comes to Bitcoin. He's been in Bitcoin since 2013. Really nice guy, really awesome guy. Wenze or Wenze, thank you for taking a little bit of time and joining. And as the name suggests, you are not an American like me. Where are you from? And tell us a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, look, thank you for the introduction. I'm Wenze. I'm from the Netherlands in Europe, based close to Amsterdam. And like Luke mentioned, I'm into Bitcoin since 2013. Over time, I became more and more interested in Bitcoin security and the security model. I mean, there's so many aspects of Bitcoin that you can focus on, but for me, really the security stood out. Over the years, I've been helping family and friends with securing their Bitcoin and making sure they hold on successfully. And in time, I decided to make my own business out of that. So I have a consulting company in the Netherlands where I help people with their custody. And then this year, I joined the Bitcoin Advisor as well as an advisor, focusing on Europe, but also other time zones that I can accommodate to. So I've a long time experience in security of Bitcoin. I have a very good understanding of all the different security models that can be used to secure your Bitcoin, and I'm a big fan of the model of the Bitcoin Advisor. So most of the Bitcoiners will advise you to go really hardcore, like take it off an exchange and do everything yourselves, and that is a very big step for most people, and there's still a lot of risk to that. What I've seen is that most people are either not comfortable with taking those steps, so they don't take the step, and they either don't buy Bitcoin or they leave it on exchange, which are the things that we don't like, or they end up with an insecure model. So I think that the Bitcoin Advisor, with its collaborative security model, is a perfect fit for most clients. It's highly secure, no single point of failure. It's easy to use and easy to learn. So I'm really excited about the product, and from what I've seen, we've been able to onboard a lot of people onto self custody, collaborative custody, which otherwise would have stuck with an ETF or an account-based Bitcoin holding. So yeah, I'm very excited about that. If you want to learn about more about security, I'm happy to answer all kind of questions, or if you want to investigate your own security model, because what I see as a big risk is that two things: people don't know the risks of their security model, and they cannot foresee what might happen in the future, right? It's very difficult to predict. So two things that I like to ask people is like, okay, what happens if you would pass away today? Would your bit How confident are you that your Bitcoin would pass on to your loved ones? Is it 100%? I don't believe so. A lot of people then do have doubts, and just analyzing their security model is typically a good way to see, okay, how the Bitcoin Advisor might be a good fit. Aside from that, I just spent a lot of time on learning about Bitcoin. I mean, there's always more to learn, right? As a physicist, I really like the technical aspects behind it, and I never was into economics, but Bitcoin got me interested in that space as well. So yeah, there's a lot to go to learn from.
Yeah, I love it. One of my one of the first Bitcoin retreats I was a part of was in Colorado, and I got off the plane and Preston Pish and I were on the same plane. And of course, he's a engineer, right? As many people probably know. But I think it was like the first 5 people that got off the plane for this Bitcoin event were all engineers or physicists of some degree. Then the sixth guy was a rancher. Then you had me, like the YouTube kid or whatever, right? That's 20 years younger than everyone and doesn't know half as much about the very basics of engineering as they do. But anyway, it's fascinating to me how Bitcoin attracts not just the gold bugs and not just the finance people, but the physicists and the engineers too. I always think that that's fascinating, and I think
Yeah,
that's
and
yeah.
100%, and I want to see that change as well, right? Bitcoin is not only for men or nerds or people that are into finance. Bitcoin is for everyone, and that's why we are here to help out. Doesn't matter what age you are, we can help you set up with the Bitcoin advisor on a wallet, and it's easy to do. We have elderly people that don't have a laptop or whatever, and just a phone or an iPad, and they can still hold on to their own Bitcoin. And I think that's very inspiring to see that we've come this far in terms of user experience and UI to make this possible. So it's not only for the tech savvy people, but it's for everyone.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely an evolution here. In the very beginning, early days of Bitcoin, only the hyper nerds of the hyper nerds could actually use Bitcoin, right? Like you couldn't buy Bitcoin. It was too early in Bitcoin's history for there to be exchanges or paper kinds of Bitcoin, right? There was a point in history where seed words didn't even exist, right? A lot of people in Bitcoin today don't realize that the whole idea of writing down 12 seed words, that is a concept that wasn't even around for the first couple of years of Bitcoin's existence, right? So the self-custody dynamic evolves and changes. And I think that's something that a lot of people have to internalize for themselves once they get into Bitcoin and self custody is that there is no end solution, right? It's like this asset is going to go up in value by a factor of 10, a factor of 100, a factor of 1,000. And that self custody dynamic is going to perpetually change, right? There was a point in time where there was no such thing as multi-sig, that there was no such thing as seed words. Now there are seed words. Now there are multi-sigs. And in 5 years, there are going to be things even more advanced. 5 years after that, there are going to be things even more advanced than that, right? And I think that's, for me personally, why I've really aligned my own incentives with Bitcoin Advisor is because, you know, when I look around at the Bitcoin space in general, the common incentive, and I'm not hating on this at all, but the common incentive is companies build products and products have a marketing budget assigned to that product, right? The company builds something, of course they want to sell it, right? And that, of course that's healthy. But the problem is that then what that means is that the thing that people keep hearing over and over is just different kinds of products. And typically they're the products that are the most well marketed. And in general, the products with the biggest marketing budget generally are some of the better products. But the problem, nonetheless, that I've seen personally, anecdotally, after talking to hundreds of people about Bitcoin, is that it very often is overwhelming. They're overwhelmed with choices. They're overwhelmed with options of which product to use, where to go, what to do. And that's why I think a service is such a different value proposition. And I think it's actually something that's way more important for people, right? If you're going to be driving down the road for the first time, you don't need to have Toyota and Honda and, Ford and Lamborghini. You don't need 20 different car companies telling you which car to drive and why their car is better. Every car is trade-offs, right? And you don't need different salesmen from different product companies telling you which way to go. In my opinion, what I realized, years ago now, was that the best aligned incentive thing for someone is not a better product, because at some point in the future, that product is going to be no longer the best product in the world. What they need is a service provider along with them to handhold them, to distill 1,000 hours of research into a very short conversation, meeting the person where they are, hand holding them through the process, walking them through it, and then guiding them over the months and over the years as those products change, as they develop and as they progress. So, yeah. Anyway, for me, that's just what I realized personally, and I've loved every minute of it. It is at times a hard job being here because people go through real life experiences, right? People lose family members, people have divorces, people get caught up in lawsuits, people lose significant amount of their net worth in Bitcoin. And so when people have those problems and those fears, and we can come along and show them how they don't have to have those concerns be as prevalent anymore, when it comes to their Bitcoin custody, to me, that's very rewarding for people.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I think it's great being vendor agnostic, right? Like you mentioned, we've been here now for over 15 years, and we made so much progress, but it's still early for Bitcoin, and the progress that we're going to make in the next 15 years might not be as big as it has been in the last 15 years, but it will be significant, and there will be changes, and we will make sure that we always choose the best solutions for our clients, right? So we will spend time as our for the advisor or more to look into what the best solutions are for our clients, and that might mean that at some point they will have to transfer to another product, but we will guide them through that and we will advise them. So I think that's a great step because they don't have to keep educating themselves all the time. Because one of the things that you often hear in Bitcoin is that self custody is free. Um, and I disagree with that because there's always a cost that either will cost you time or there's a monetary payment involved with that. Because the amount of time that we have spent studying Bitcoin and self custody, yeah, that's not for everyone. Not everybody is able or willing to spend that time or is that tech savvy to analyze all that. So then you have to go for the other solution, right? But saying it is free, I think that is a concern to me. Just write down your seed word is not enough to protect your your value into the decades to come. You need to do more than that.
Right. I'm really glad you brought that up. I wasn't going to, but now that you have, going back to the car analogy, it's like, yeah, the car costs money, but if you're going to walk to the grocery store, it is very cold and snowy where I am outside, recording this in December here, and there are icicles 3 feet tall off my roof here. And it's like, yeah, the car costs money to fill with gas to get to the store, but walking to the store in that cold snow, it's like that's not free either, right? Oh, but it's free because I'm not paying for gas, right? So I fully agree with your point that I would highly encourage everyone, and I had to do this for myself too, was internalize the intangible risks with that, right? So when people go to a Bitcoin exchange, they often ask themselves, which exchange should I use? Which one's the cheapest, right? Coinbase or Strike or River or Swan or whatever. You have all the options. People have all these options. Again, getting back to the marketing budget dilemma. And the problem is that people often end up with the place that is either the most user friendly or the place that has the cheapest fees. And the problem with that is that, okay, maybe exchange A is 0.5% cheaper than exchange B, but if their business model, if their underlying security setup for their Bitcoin or the regulations they have with it or whatever, if there is a intangible risk there that is very real, you don't see it, you don't touch it, you don't taste it, but it's very real. Like I think that is the big problem that people forget about. And I think this is a common dilemma people have in Bitcoin is that if they go the route of the exchanges, or let's say the route of an ETF perhaps is a better example when it comes to holding the Bitcoin. With the ETF, you might have a tangible cost of 0.25%, 0.5%, 1%, whatever, but there's an intangible risk as well. And I would argue that intangible risk is greater. That between the risk of insolvency, of neglect, of a government action, or just of a spread, right? You don't even need some sort of crazy, mind-boggling government takeover, whatever. Just the reality that there are these hidden costs with these ETFs. That's very real, and I think oftentimes people go with the ETF that is the lowest fee, thinking that's the cheapest, but it actually may not be the cheapest. And then likewise, to your point about the self custody, other side of the bell curve, the other side of the spectrum here, that may be free, quote unquote, because you're not paying that 0.25%, 0.5% to the ETF like you're doing when you self custody. But the risk is, what is the probability that you're going to lose those keys and lose that Bitcoin? What about the fact that if you pass on and that Bitcoin is not in the proper trust and estate planning or the proper will set up, that over a certain dollar amount, you're going to be paying 30, 40% of taxes to the government, or at least your kids will be, right? That 40% is not a realized cost for your entire life. But if you were to pass on, that intangible cost becomes really tangible all of a sudden for your kids, right? And then, of course, there's the question of lawsuits. Unfortunately, I'm talking to someone right now who's going through this, right? That he had a bunch of Bitcoin, owned it for a few years. Now the Bitcoin has gone up 10, 20x from his cost basis or whatever. And he has this guy that's suing him, trying to take a couple Bitcoin from him, right? It's ridiculous. It's nonsensical. It's crazy and it's gross. But that's what people do, right? If people think you have a lot of money, they'll try to nickel and dime you as much as they can, right? And so my point is that nothing in life is free. And I agree with you that this whole point that self custody is free is just not true, right? And every option only has different costs. Some options have more tangible costs than others, and other options have arguably no tangible costs, but there are very real intangible costs. And I think most people, I would highly encourage everyone watching this, really consider those costs because those costs will only grow as a function of Bitcoin price going up, right? Every time Bitcoin price doubles, the risks associated with any given direction you've gone only grow. And I would argue they grow faster than the rate at which Bitcoin price grows, right? All these risks grow at a faster rate than the rate of Bitcoin growing. So I think that's a great point that you brought up. And that's not to scare people, right? Because reality is that,
No,
yeah,
definitely not. I
yeah.
mean, I'm a perfect example myself. It's just something you learn over time, and I think we are here to help you prevent some mistakes we might have made in the past or the learnings that we've taken along the way and bring them to the right point right away. Because I would say I'm well experienced in self custody and how to manage this myself. But now that I have a young kid, I have a family to take care of, I want to be 100% sure that if something happens to me, that they will receive at least a part of my Bitcoin, right? That they can pay off the house, that they live a happy life without me leaving them with the problems because I didn't properly take care of them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have to take care of other people, and yeah, you have to be extra careful, I would say. So that really changes your way of thinking. And I liked how you made the car analogy, right? We typically like to do that, and I see people saying, "Hey, learning Bitcoin is like learning how to drive a car." Well, I don't think that's a very good analogy, right? Because cars have evolved so much, and basically all cars are the same, right? They have the steer, a gas pedal, maybe a shift gear, whatever, but they all work very similar, and you can just hop into one car or the other, and you can drive away. That's not the same with Bitcoin custody. It's more like you still have to assemble the parts and put it together, and then learn how to use it. So yeah, there's no simple way to learn all of that. There's a lot of time involved.
Right, for sure. And with that intangible risk, right? It's like sure, maybe someone understands that okay, instead of 10 different car companies pitching me a different product, I need a driving instructor to walk me through how to drive every different kind of car. But I'm gonna, that costs money, and I want to do it for free. So I'm gonna just start driving by myself on the road and figure it out as I go, right? And the problem is that, of course, that intangible risk is very large, and maybe nothing bad happens. Hopefully, nothing bad happens. But intangible risk, has a tendency of sneaking up on people. And I think actually, to a larger point, it's kind of the same thing with Bitcoin versus fiat, right? It's like fiat. Let's say the U.S. dollar, right? So you're in Europe, I'm in America, right? I have the better fiat currency, right? U.S. dollars, American bucks, and I don't think the dollar's going to hyperinflate next year. In fact, I don't think it's going to hyperinflate the year after that or the year after that. Maybe it never will. I think it probably eventually will. But the point is that hyperinflation risk in a fiat currency or inflation risk more broadly, like that's an intangible risk, right? The whole understanding of people adopting Bitcoin and abandoning the fiat money is because the promise of something that is free, aka political currency, fiat money, has that intangible risk associated with it. That yes, the government is giving you this stimulus check, the government is giving you this bailout, the government is giving you this handout for free, take the bait, but they're neglecting the fact that, oh yeah, by the way, we are guaranteeing our bonds in nominal terms because we can debase on it in real terms, right? So the whole idea of something being free just simply is not true. And anyway, that's my encouragement for everyone is that anyone that tells you your current setup doesn't have a cost is lying to you. Every kind of Bitcoin custody setup has a cost. It's just a question of how big is that cost, and is that a fixed tangible cost? Is that an intangible cost? Is it a big cost? Is it a small cost? So I think that's the big encouragement. So if we could talk, maybe pivot a little bit towards a more positive side of this, where how do we help people reduce those risks? How do we help people reduce the intangible risks by having no single point of failure in the custody setup, right? So this is a problem I personally went through when my Bitcoin started going up significantly in value. I know this is a problem you've gone through. I don't have kids. You have a kid. Can you walk us through that? Why is reducing single points of failure to zero so critical at removing intangible costs?
Yeah, so what people fail to understand still is, although they learn a lot about Bitcoin, is that it's all or nothing, right? If something goes wrong, you're locked out of your Bitcoin. So it's critical that you reduce the single point of failure. So even if the risk is very low, like the probability that something is going to happen, it's almost always catastrophic if it happens. And that can be all kind of things, right? It can be someone finding your seed words, or I don't know, being locked out of your fold. And even if the probability is very low, if it happens, you are screwed. So you want to mitigate all those risks, and doing that solely by yourself is almost impossible. And even if you're able to do it by yourself, then quickly the setup becomes so complex that it's very hard to involve your loved ones, or for when something happens when you pass away. Because what we typically see, there's still a lot that, like, if there's a couple, then it's typically one of the persons that's involved with Bitcoin. The spouse doesn't really know that much about it, and yeah, basically, if you want to run everything yourself, you need to educate them all the time. You need to um, basically do test setups and make sure that, yeah, if something happens to me, can you actually run through all these steps to recover the Bitcoin? And most people are not able to do that because they want to spend their time elsewhere, right? They have better things to do, and I think that's the big value, of course, that we offer you. We offer you a secure model without a single point of failure, and that allows you peace of mind and allowing you to spend your time on more important things that to you, like your job, your profession, your family, or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, and I think ultimately that's one of the ways in which people can end up stacking more Bitcoin, right? Is that by basically outsourcing the obsession. Obviously, we encourage everyone to learn, right? It's like one of my favorite things is helping friends, prospects, or clients of mine understand Bitcoin at new levels, right? So, when I say people outsource that obsession to someone else, I'm not saying they stop learning. Actually, I think they learn more when they have somebody else obsessing for them and then summarizing everything for them, right? So I think that's part of the irony. But yeah, the thing I would encourage everyone is that there are only three options here. Either you have to be obsessed about Bitcoin on your Bitcoin security from a custody perspective, a legal perspective, and a tax perspective together with no failure points indefinitely forever. So either your only three options are become obsessed yourself, hire somebody to be obsessed for you, help accelerate your learning, help accelerate education, and keep you a couple years ahead of everyone else in their education. And then the other third option is that you lose your Bitcoin. Like there is no free lunch here. Either you got to put in the time right now and become an expert in everything to do with the custody side, the social engineering side, minimizing the tax, maximizing the legal protections for your Bitcoin. Either do that yourself or hire someone else to do it. And the only other option is that there will be a point of time at which you lose your Bitcoin. Maybe that's not now, maybe that's not 5 years from now, but as Bitcoin price keeps going up, these things just sneak up on people. And it's really hard when I see that happen, and that's why I think it's so important that everyone considers this. To your point, is that really there's no other option. Either you have to put in the time yourself, or you have to bring somebody into your team that has an aligned incentive with you to help keep you informed.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, we don't want to scare people, but we want to be honest with them as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are the risks with your current situation, and inform people, and what the better solution might be. Yeah,
Right.
and uh, a lot of people, if something happens, most people won't tell, right? That they're happy to celebrate their successes and how much money they made and etc. But people losing their Bitcoin, sure, there's people sharing that story, but a lot of people won't because they feel stupid by doing that, and they don't want to hear from other people and uh, get blamed for not taking proper care of their Bitcoin, etc. So
Right, right, for sure. It's definitely something that is a hard conversation, right? I've had that conversation many times with people, and unfortunately, when something bad has happened, you can't do it, right? So I guess to be a little more positive and optimistic here,
yes,
adding on to that is that to me, the irony is that the fastest way to buy more Bitcoin is to reduce these risks, right? Because right now, if you own a certain amount of Bitcoin and you have those intangible costs with that Bitcoin, whether you have it in some sort of counterparty risk solution like an ETF, or if you have it in a single point of failure setup, the fastest way to justify buying more Bitcoin is to reduce that risk. The fastest way to orange pill that brother, that parent, that child, that spouse, right? The fast way to orange pill them is to give them a solution where they can reduce almost all of the risks in getting involved, right? Because most of the people in your life that you're trying to orange pill, that business you're trying to orange pill, yourself, you're wondering if you can double down your allocation, right? All those things, like, and I think that's something that a lot of people don't necessarily think about, right? So we can talk about how, oh, people aren't considering the risks from a pessimistic perspective of, oh, they might lose all their Bitcoin or whatever. I think it's also from that optimistic perspective that, like, if you address those risks, if you do the uncomfortable thing and get that out of the way, now we can have the really fun conversation of, hey, in what ways can we increase the allocation? In what ways can we help you accelerate your network's understanding of Bitcoin by making this easier for them, simpler for them, and all that? So I'm curious if you have anything to add to that about how, I've got plenty of stories. Everyone on the team, Peter, Andy, Scott, Terrence, everyone on the team's got plenty of stories about this. I'm curious if you have anything, um, any personal stories or any thoughts for people to consider when it comes to this question of ending up with more Bitcoin than what they had previously.
Yeah, I think I see a very common thing that happens with several clients that um, if you make it too complicated for them, they don't get into Bitcoin at all from the start. So they miss out on having Bitcoin. And if they're comfortable on their setup, they feel more comfortable of acquiring more. What I also see often is that people, when they are able to involve their spouse and make them feel comfortable with doing it this way, they will also agree to allocating more of their funds to Bitcoin, right? Instead of it being like a small side hustle of the husband or the wife. That's what I see. And I think most importantly, Bitcoin is savings technology, right? So not having to worry and spend time on securing your Bitcoin allows you to do what you love and like to do. And if you create value, you can store that value in Bitcoin and acquire more Bitcoin over time. So I think anyone that is successful will be able to get more Bitcoin over time just by doing what they love to do.
Right, right. And let's clarify the incentive structure here, right? Because this is, I think, pretty important, right? Bitcoin Advisor, we don't, uh, the company does not charge by the hour. The company does not charge as a function of complexity for the client. We have an aligned, in my opinion, we have an aligned incentive structure that we are directly vested in seeing clients increase their Bitcoin stack. And personally, I think that's why, we do a decent job of it. At the time of recording, our current metrics are that the average client increases their stack by over 50% in the first 12 months, right? And so obviously that's an average. So reality is that the median's a bit less, right? Some people increase their stack by 200%, other people increase it by 10%. But whatever the case, because our fee is only 1%, which degrades down to half a percent, by the way, like the beauty is that even if we help someone increase their stack only by 10%, it is more than worth it. They are buying back their time, buying back their peace of mind. They don't have to spend 100, 200, 300 hours a year worrying about their setup, and they're ending up with more Bitcoin, ironically, in the process. So anyway, can we talk about that a little bit? If you could outline the fee structure for Bitcoin Advisor and why that is actually aligned with client incentives.
Yeah, so I think what we do interestingly is that we have a degrading fee structure, right? So we start at 1% and it degrades over the next 4 years to 0.75 and then zero point 0.5 over the next 4 years. So in 8 years, you're down to 0.5%, nicely sinking it to, well, not exactly to the halving, but to the length of the halving cycling of Bitcoin to 4 years. Um, for me that is interesting because you can really focus on like the long-term clients that are in it for the same as us, saving into Bitcoin, the long time perspective instead of the traders that might want to get out in a year. And what I've seen is when I talk to clients is that um, they don't really mind the fee as long as they can get the value from it, right? And we add that value because, like you said, we are focused on helping them allocate more to their Bitcoin stack if they want to, or just educating. We are there for them all the time, right? Regardless of what they need from us. So I think that's great. One of the other things that I mean, for a lot of people or Bitcoiners, it can be hard to pay in Bitcoin, right? They don't want to see their stack decrease. On the other side, most people still think in fiat, like in dollars or in euros. So right now, Bitcoin is still growing 40% per year, right, on average. So if you pay 1% for secure Bitcoin, then, well, instead of 40%, you get 39% of fiat value additionally per year. How I see it coming out in the long term, like when Bitcoin is fully monetized, then you will have technical devaluation. So prices will continue to drop for every product just because, well, we're betting at producing product, right? Technology, etc. So I think that prices of products will continue to drop by like 10% forever. And if you then have to pay a small fee for securing your Bitcoin, I don't think that's much of a problem
Mm-hmm.
at all.
Yeah, I think the other thing too is that I think the biggest problem is that most people aren't bullish enough in Bitcoin, and I think most people haven't really considered that there are only going to be so many people that are base chain holders, right? It's like there will be a
Yeah,
cap to how many people hold actual UTXOs. There will be a cap to how many people are actually doing layer one transactions, and the reality is that, and the irony is that most people get into Bitcoin because they don't like the banks, but the irony is that people that are layer one holders are going to have to be the base rails for the entire globe, right? Everything sidechain, everything higher chain, layer two, layer three, layer whatever, all of that is going to have to be built upon the back of UTXOs, and the people funding that will be UTXO holders. And so, ironically, is that the very people that got into Bitcoin because they despise the banks are probably going to end up being the banks in the long term future, right? In the same way that Hal Finney predicted a $10 million Bitcoin all the way back in 2009, this is basically what he predicted. And so I think in the really long term, this is where this starts to become really important, right? Is that yes, you are paying the Bitcoin advisor, you are paying other key agents to help you turn this Bitcoin into escrow compatible Bitcoin. Yes, you are paying a cost to do that. But the benefit in being one of those people is that the buildings atop you can be bigger, right? Like if we think of layer one Bitcoin, like the actual dirt on the island of Manhattan as an example, the land that is perceived as lower risk is going to be where the bigger buildings are built, right? Because most people will never own the actual dirt of the island. They will just own, some portion of the building built atop of that, right? And so in the same way with Bitcoin, most people will never own layer one. There's only so much block space. There's only so much data per block. And hopefully this is making sense for people. I'm trying not to go too off the deep end here, but the long story short is that most people in Bitcoin today are so incredibly early to Bitcoin that their UTXO, the Bitcoin they hold, it's not just going to be this number that keeps going up. It's going to be a critical component that probably thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not millions of people are going to be using to make their whole lives function, make all of their transactions, right? Your Bitcoin is going to be the base layer of the future economy, of the future world. And so my point is that as much as there might be a fee for doing that and lowering that risk, all the benefits associated with being somebody that's able to provide those services to people in the future, I think is going to be worth way more than 0.5% a year, right? I think that's the optimistic way to look at it. And then getting back to more the flip side of that coin, the pessimistic side, is that what is your current intangible risk, right? I think most people, if they were honest with themselves, their current annual intangible rate of risk is well over 0.5%. I think most people that have self custody of Bitcoin are probably in like the 3 to 5% range. Maybe I don't know if you have a number in your head. I've met people that are very, very good and know what they're doing, and maybe their risk is very low. Other people, it's very high. But again, this gets back to that tangible, intangible
yep.
discussion. Would you rather pay somebody 1% to help you buy back 10% of your time every year because now you don't have to be obsessing about Bitcoin on the side and being paranoid and being scared? And also simultaneously, this person, because they're getting paid in Bitcoin and because they're getting paid as a percentage of the Bitcoin, they're incentivized directly to help you end up with more Bitcoin at the end of that year than what you started out with. And simultaneously, you're reducing that intangible risk, you're buying back your time, and you're allowing all those future opportunities when people start building up atop of your Bitcoin. I mean, to me, it is the ideal align incentive model, more than charging by the hour, because the incentive is, build the most hours, right? And if you are charging by the product, then the incentive is sell the most products. And I think people don't necessarily need more products and they don't necessarily need more complexity. I think what people need is more peace of mind, more security, and more Bitcoin. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I couldn't agree more. I think
Yeah.
people also need to consider how they want to spend their time, right?
Right.
Is their time well spent on looking through all these details? And so for some people, it might seem like there's a high cost in using such a service, but I think for many people, they can make better use of their time. Is it a job? Is it time with family or whatever? That
Right.
doesn't really matter.
Yeah, for sure.
And then if you look at other wealth products, right, it's very common that you pay like a percentage fee, but then you also pay another fee for any of the gains that you make, all kind of interesting constructions that we don't have to do, right? Um, it's a very simple construction that we have.
Yeah, yeah. That's the irony is that a traditional financial advisor doesn't actually help the client custody their own assets, and yet they often charge more than us. But anyway, I'm not hitting
Yep,
on financial
yep.
advisors. They do play an important role. They help people stay consistent with their emotions in a stacking plan. So yeah. So what is your experience work with the Bitcoin Advisor team? Obviously, people have probably seen me a dozen different times in different videos talk about this, and they don't necessarily behind the scenes, right? I talk to people every single day at Bitcoin Advisor. 3 to 6 new people a day, getting to know them, their stories, their worries, their concerns, their life. Frankly, it's amazing how open people are with sharing the wins and the losses that they're going through, right? So I've been very fortunate to meet a lot of people. And for me, that's my favorite part of this. I know you met a lot of people. At the Bitcoin Advisor team, we got a team of 40 people. The way I like to put it is that, and this is a question I have to get, is like, Luke, why don't you do this on your own? Why don't you create a Bitcoin advisory service competing to this, right? You can do so much better on your own. And I explain to people, it's like, I can't do that, right? Because when I get 1 year of education on my own, right, the whole team, we get a combined amount of 40 years of education every single year, right?
Yep.
It's like I'm in Bitcoin all day, every day, more hours in any given week than probably most people, even in Bitcoin, are into Bitcoin. And yet I still can't keep up, right? Because literally every day we have 40 different people on the team learning 40 different things, 39 of which I would have had no clue about, right? So anyway, my point there is that a lot of the people on the team are more overt and outwardly spoken online. Like I said, myself, Peter Dunworth, and others, and other people, like yourself, don't necessarily have that desire to be out there, and I really admire that and respect that. But anyway, I'm curious, what's been your experience working with the team and working with clients, like on a more personal note?
Yeah, so in terms of working with clients, what I see is that a lot of clients, they just like to have someone that they can talk about Bitcoin, right? Because we're still early. For us who are always into Bitcoin, it seems like the whole world revolves around Bitcoin, right? But if you go outside, most people still think it's a bubble or whatever. Um, so most of the clients, they really appreciate that they have someone that they can ask all their questions and tell their stories. So like you said, it's also like building that personal relationship because they finally have someone to talk to that doesn't seem them as like this weird Bitcoin, right? So I think that's a great thing for them. I just like working with people in general. So if it's either remote or in person, I mean, the Netherlands is a small country, so I also do site visits with people, right? I can just drive across the country in 2 hours. So that's great. Um, in terms of with the company, yeah, we have aligned incentives, right? So um, we all gain value if somebody does something valuable for the company. If you create some kind of great video, other people see it, and it might also be a client of mine or someone from my country that ends up with me. And on the other hand, I create more technical documentation or posts and help people answering questions on like the inside, which can help the other advisors. So we all have our different roles, but we all add to building that knowledge and understanding of where we are going. So to me, it's a great theme. Learning a lot. Like I don't have a background in finance. I have a background in physics. So there's a lot of things that I can learn there. I'm not, for example, a marketing person. So we have other people that are more experienced there. And I think overall we have a very nice team that yeah is working well together and all there just promoting Bitcoin and making sure that everybody has their Bitcoin properly secured. And that is really the end goal, right? We want to avoid people from making mistakes or ending up in a bad situation, and also thinking about a lot about the ethos of Bitcoin, right? So for me, it's very important that what we do attributes to the strength of the Bitcoin network, which means that people should self custody. It's not that I don't like traditional finance products. I mean, I don't have anything with it, but I think having all the Bitcoin in ETFs, for example, and with just 6 companies, yeah, then Bitcoin would not be decentralized anymore, and it wouldn't have the value that it has right now, and also probably it wouldn't have the monetary gains anymore if that would happen. So for me, it's very important that we stay aligned to that Bitcoin ethos, and I think as a team we're doing well in accomplishing that.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing. I think that's a great place to wrap up here. And I fully agree that decentralization is critical and key. And that's why I'm so glad at Bitcoin Advisor. It's all self custody Bitcoin. It's all actually on chain. There's no paper. There's no counterparty risk. You don't have to trust you or me, right? And I often say that I would like people to trust me, but people eventually trust me because they really don't have to trust us, right? And I think that's the beautiful thing is that we are decentralized. We're a decentralized group of people, from a dozen or so different countries with clients, and even more countries than that. At different keys in different places, different jurisdictions, and so we are constantly learning about the nuances of every single tax structure in every single different country. We're continuously learning, continuously growing,
Yeah,
and my hope is that people listening to this will be thrilled to join and become clients, become team members, get involved. And I think ultimately, basically, people are paying a tangible cost for, in my opinion, an invaluable intangible service. And the whole goal is keep them ahead of the pack, keep them 2, 3, 4 years farther down the line and more secure and more safe than everyone else. And if we can do that forever, then we've got happy clients forever that are stacking more Bitcoin forever, and we're happy too because then we have a job in Bitcoin forever that is agnostic to whatever the product of the day is, whatever the need of the day is, because as I always say, we have less in common with the near future and the past, and so this is my thrill is to help people prepare for that. So thank you very much for joining this. If you're watching this, maybe you'll be working with me or with you or someone else on the team. But yeah, thanks for taking a bit of time and introducing yourself. And hopefully, this has been useful to people. And that way, when they talk to us, that they'll already have something to go back to. So thanks for joining.
thanks, Luke. It was great catching up.
Awesome.